Greetings fellow Mist Wanderers, my name is Steve Morgan and this is DM of the Mists, covering all things Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft. I wanted to say, a few months ago, I think it's been a full year now, I can't believe it's been a full year, I did a video where I gave some suggestions of minor / recurring villains you could add to a Ravenloft campaign, some of which come from Curse of Strahd, the idea being that you finish Curse of Strahd and if they survive the events of Curse of Strahd and you continue with like a Ravenloft campaign, you can include them, which is what I've done in my own game, the game that I run that inspired these videos. I'll give a quick recap of the 8 who were included. You'll see next to me here, and you'll recognise a few if you're familiar with Curse of Strahd, and maybe there's a few you didn't know. It's a fairly popular video as my videos go, especially on the Ravenloft front, so if you haven't seen it before, feel free to check it out. And I always wanted to do a part 2, because I realised there were like 1 or 2 people I kind of forgot, or didn't feel confident or comfortable doing back then, because I was kind of newer to Ravenloft. But yeah, so here's part 2. A quick reminder, when I say recurring villains, these are non-Darklord villains, because, spoiler alert for Ravenloft, and if you're a player, get out of here, the Darklords can't leave their domains, so the idea of a recurring villain appearing in multiple places, unless it's in multiple places within their domain, like Strahd appearing multiple times in places around Barovia, doesn't really work. The idea of these is kind of people who might appear in Mordant, and they might appear in Daemonliu, or whatever. And I say recurring villains, some of these, they might get defeated in the first encounter, so they're not really recurring, but if they manage to get away and escape, or the players sort of see them in the distance, and maybe they crop up multiple times and appear in multiple domains. And when I say minor, obviously I'd say Darklords are kind of the major villains, they're the BBEGs of their own respective lands and domains. You know, they're not going to be like huge enemies, but, you know, still fun to include them. I'd like to give a big thank you to the folks at the Fraternity of Shadows website for their Mistipedia, their Ravenloft wiki. It's amazing. I love it. I use it all the time. And I did a deep dive essentially in their villain category and kind of just went through loads, picked out the ones that I liked, that if I didn't already want to, you know, think to include them. I will state though, I've not really included any Gothic Earth villains I found, and I've only stuck to 5th edition domains, or those could be sort of put in a 5th edition domain. So for example, I've not included, I think I saw one that was from Sithicus or worked well in Sithicus, but I haven't included that because it's not a 5th edition domain, and I think there might have been something like a homebrew thing that somebody included, or like a fan canon type thing, but I think it works well in the Sea of Sorrows, for example, so I've still, you know, might still be able to include it. Let's go! Number 1, the Whistling Fiend. Now the Whistling Fiend I think I mentioned at the end of the previous video. There's a bit of art and small mentions of him in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. There's at the start of chapter 5 in the Monsters of Ravenloft section that kind of leads into the, well, I want to call it Bestiary, but I think it's called Bistari, whatever. And also I found out in researching this video, there's a brief adventure idea mentioned for Darkon, which is quite cool. He's given us an example of a horror monster that's a notorious monster where its scariness and its reputation is kind of bigged up, maybe bigged up by the NPCs. It's a great thing to do. I kind of try and do it with Strahd in Curse of Strahd. The more they kind of learn about Strahd before they meet him and how strong he is, how much people fear him, it makes the PCs and therefore the players kind of think, this guy's going to be tough. And that same can be said for the Whistling Fiend. Van Richten's Guide doesn't give a stat block, and in fact it does say that you can be whatever you want it to be. But the Mistipedia info says he's a fiend / demon, or subcategory demon, that is a babau, I think that's how it's pronounced. And there's a stat block for that. So that is, it's challenge rating 4, so not huge in the grand scheme of things, but could be good for like a low level party. And then if you've got a higher level party, maybe choose a stronger stat block. Maybe give it a weapon as per its art. I thought it was a spear, but apparently it's a pike. But, you know, maybe a spear, javelin glaive, any of those kind of like long pointy weapons. One idea might be the vicious weapon, so vicious pike, I guess, which does a bit of extra damage on top of what you get if you roll a 20 or get a crit. It does even more damage on top. Or if you want to be really brutal, really Ravenloft, there's the 9 Life Stealer, which has charges, and if you roll a 20 on the d20 for an attack roll, and the creature has less than 100 hit points, you'll succeed on a DC 15 Constitution saving throw or be slain instantly. That is harsh, brutal. Kind of reminds me of like the Vorpal Sword as well, and what the Doulahan does with, you know, if it gets a natural 20 on you, you got to roll a con save or die. So that could be a very cool thing to give it. Although caveat that obviously if the players defeat it, they then claim that for themselves and that could backfire, so proceed with caution. And where would you put the Whistling Fiend? Well, it can go anywhere. Cartacus makes sense, as its MO is whistling and music. Got they hear the sort of music whistling in the distance. Maybe they think it's another Cartacus bard. But nope, it's the Whistling Fiend about to kill somebody. Or Darkon could be another shout, given that it's already got an adventure tie-in idea for Darkon in Van Richten's Guide. Number 2, Count Yvern the Scourge. The source for this is Quoth the Raven 4. For those of you who don't know, Quoth the Raven's sort of like fanzines, netzines, I want to say. They're available through the Fraternity of Shadows website. If you don't go on the wiki, if you go to like fraternityofshadows.com, and then you should see sort of like a section where you can view them all, download them all, and I was able to sort of access the PDF for this one. It is essentially a male Death Knight, looking for a powerful enough holy champion to destroy it. And my players have fought a Death Knight fairly recently, but if they hadn't, I think I would have included this, because I love the idea of just a Death Knight wandering around the mists or the domains of dread, who's just looking for a strong enough warrior to fight, and I've got a paladin in my group as well. Or you might want to save a Death Knight introduction in your Ravenloft campaign for Lord Soth, infamous Dragonlance character / Ravenloft, because obviously there's the old Ravenloft novels where he appeared. Stat block, Death Knight, or if it's a lower level party, you could consider the Death Knight aspirant from the new monster manual, so sort of like a weaker or mini boss Death Knight, if you will, or maybe Ghost Knight from Tome of Beasts. Quoth the Raven did give it extra abilities, but that was written, I think, before 5th edition came out, so bear that in mind if you take a look. You might want to sort of borrow some of those and add it. And when I looked in Quoth the Raven, he has a mount called Daredevil as well. A warhorse. You could maybe use a skeletal warhorse. The skeletal warhorse is quite weak. You can consider maybe a nightmare. Or I recently came across the Shadhava, if I'm pronouncing that right, in Tome of Beasts, which basically looks like this sort of evil unicorn. I think that'd be really cool. Where would you find Yvern the Scourge? Well, Wandering the Mists makes sense. I do love the idea of just kind of like they're wandering the mists between domains and just this Death Knight appears. It's like, I challenge you. But any domain, really. I did see mentions in Quoth the Raven's info about Nova Varsa, Staunton Bluffs, Darkon and the Shadowlands, or part of the Shadowlands as mentioned, so one of those might make more sense. Number 3, Louise Renier. Now I talked about Louise Renier in my Second to Rocker Reading More Drawers video, so I have a DM's Guild resource called the Second to Rocker Reading, did a demo video when I released it, and it was the first ever video on this channel, but a year-ish ago, maybe less than that, I did a second sort of follow-up video where I did more drawers, and in one of the drawers Louise came up, so I thought I'd expand on her in this video as well. She is the twin sister to Jacqueline Renier, who is the Darklord of Rishamelo. And the best source for her, in my opinion, is the old Ravenloft novel, Scholar of Decay. I really like this novel. I've read most of the Ravenloft novels, and I think a few people have asked me to do a video where I talk about my thoughts on the different novels, so I'll do that at some point. And I really enjoyed Scholar of Decay. She's also mentioned in Van Richten's Guide, but I think Van Richten's Guide changes the lore, or is kind of a bit more vague, versus Scholar of Decay. In Scholar of Decay, she's a were-rat, and in Van Richten's Guide, it kind of suggests she may not be, because she's exiled by her sister, who is a were-rat, but it doesn't say whether she is or isn't, so maybe she isn't. Maybe she didn't want to get involved with the family business of, hey, we're all were-rats, or maybe she was a were-rat who opposed her, got chucked out. I think it's left open for you to decide, I guess, as the DM. Because Van Richten's Guide says she's exiled, you could put her in somewhere that's kind of like Rishamelo but isn't, and my vote would be Daemonlio. I think having her as a were-rat, if you decide were-rat, in the sort of sewers of Daemonlio, I think that would work really well. Stat block, were-rat, if she's a were-rat. Otherwise, I think I suggested somewhere, because I think I included her in Second to Roker Reading, if memory serves. Otherwise, cultist, noble, spy. Plus there's new variants and higher challenge rating variants of those 3 in the new monster manual. Where? Well, as I said, Rishamelo, Daemonlio, anywhere with an air of bourgeoisie. It also depends on if you're going the Scholar of Decay or Van Richten's Guide route as well. If you're doing Scholar of Decay, maybe she's in Rishamelo and maybe she's not exiled. If she's in Van Richten's Guide, maybe elsewhere. Number 4, Grimgroth. The source for this is Quoth the Raven again, this time 27, a more recent issue. Grimgroth is a Kobolak. That's a type or variant of Bugbear. Bugbears are the sort of goblinoid variant. You've got goblins, you've got hobgoblins, and you've got bugbears. I'm familiar with them, not through Ravenloft, but before running Curse of Strahd and Lost Mine of Pandalva, and there's bugbears and various different goblin types in Lost Mine of Pandalva. Grimgroth grabbed my attention because it's quite a quirky one. He receives strength from death and becomes stronger upon hearing screams of his victims. But he's weakened by laughter. So I don't know if Quoth the Raven goes into the sort of the mechanics of it, but one idea I had is maybe if a person is hurt, they cry out in pain, Grimgroth has advantage on its next attack. But if the characters somehow, the PCs somehow find out that laughter affects it, if they, laugh as a free action during the turn, it has disadvantage. Other attacks against him maybe have advantage. Something like that would be cool. Maybe drop some sort of clue or lore about the whole laughter thing, because I don't know how else they would think to do that. Stat block, one of the bugbear ones. So bugbears aren't super strong, so this would kind of work well for a lower level party, I guess. I did notice Flea Mortals has a few bugbear options, and Bugbear Predator, especially the artwork, jumped out at me. Something like that could be really good. Where? Anywhere. Just needs a cave, really. A side quest in a domain. I'm sure there are some domains that work better than others, but I don't know. You tell me. And I realised when I was getting this video ready, this one's probably not really a recurring villain, because if they fight him in his cave, the info for him says he's got like a cave where he cave lair where he keeps his victims. Unless he's got some sort of escape route, it might be a one-done thing and not so much a recurring thing. Number 5, Jack Bequick. The source for this is Children of the Night Vampires, which you can grab from DM's Guild. I'll put a link in the description. This one grabbed my attention because its backstory is really wacky, but also when you kind of get to the sort of end point and realise what it's about, it's like, oh wow, actually that's really scary. He was cursed by a wizard for offending the wizard, and was cursed to be eternally invisible. Then he wandered around, met a vampire, and helped the vampire out a few times, and then thought, if I get turned into a vampire, maybe I can be visible again. And it didn't work. He's now a vampire who is invisible. So you think of how tough and difficult and scary vampires are. An invisible one sounds really interesting. It does say in the information that it remains invisible even after becoming a vampire, but can control it if he feeds, so he can choose to be visible. But I do like that, the sort of advantage on attacks and, being attacked and bitten by an invisible vampire, I think is really cool. Interestingly, the information said that, and this obviously was predates 5th edition, but that he likes to try and charm people anyway. And then I remembered from at least in the old 5th edition rules, the 2014 ones, which I'm still using, in order for charm to work, or at least for vampires, the target needs to be able to see the charmer, in this case the vampire, and obviously it's invisible. But I think in updated rules, that's been dropped. It's more like the charm person spell, which I don't think has that stipulation, but just bear that in mind. Stat block wise, obviously things like vampire or vampire spawn if you've got a weaker party perhaps, or one of the new variants in the new monster manual. And the cool thing as well, when I was looking at the source for this, was that he's got his own mini dungeon as well, Jack's House of Horrors. So I haven't had a deep dive into it, but you could attach some sort of mini dungeon as well that's probably full of traps. I think that's a really cool idea. Where would Jack be? Well, Cartacus is where he says he's settled, but his information does say that he's kind of one of the domains of dread, settled in Cartacus. You could put him anywhere, really. Number 6, Rodjan Dilisnya. So you might be thinking the name Dilisnya sounds familiar. You've got Yvern Dilisnya, who's one of the 2 Dark Lords of Borka, and Leo Dilisnya, if you know your Barovian history, maybe you read Strahd Memoirs of a Vampire. Leo Dilisnya is the Balverti spy/assassin who tries to defeat Strahd, overthrow and usurp Strahd on Sergei and Tatiana's wedding day, but fails because that's when Strahd becomes a vampire. And in Curse of Strahd, he's a pile of bones in a box in a house. But yes, this is another Dilisnya. He's a former paladin of Ezra turned Blackguard. So Ezra is the sort of god of the mists, if you will. Blackguard is kind of evil, dark paladin. While researching this video, I found that there is artwork for him in an old resource called Legacy of the Blood. But at the time when I ran him, because I ran him in Forlorn, I didn't have art. But I use something else. I'm not very comfortable showing non-Ravenloft art in my videos in case anyone takes issue with it. Especially in this case, this was somebody's art where they said, I do commissions, blah, blah, blah. But if you were to Google Dark Paladin art on Google Images, you would probably find it. It's kind of like an old man in this really gnarly dark armor with a big shield. And he appeared in Forlorn as a sort of side quest. I talked about this in my Forlorn Part 1 video, which was everything up until Castle Tristan Noara. And his patron is Ebonbane, and that's knowingly my PC, who's a paladin/warlock. His patron is Ebonbane as well. And so Rodjan challenged him to a duel. and he wears a suit of demon armor, which is going to be perfect later on because my PC's taken that, and it's increased his AC. But then when he fights Everbane in the future, he's going to all his attacks are going to be a disadvantage. Evil DM laugh. Stat block for Rodjan: if it's a low level, maybe Knight, Blackguard from Brawler's Guide to Monsters, or Champion and Warlord, also again from Brawler's Guide to Monsters. I used Warlord because I'd used Blackguard for Vedeska and Volkovnia, and Champion for Gondor, so I kind of use a stat blocks for other people, so I made him. And my players are at a high level, so I used a higher challenge rating one as well. Where would you put him? Forlorn is the most obvious one, because that's where his information says he's currently residing. But I don't know, you can put him wherever you want. Maybe he wanders, maybe he's in Borka helping out Yvern, maybe as part of the Dilisnya family, maybe somewhere else. And he wasn't recurring in my game. This is a video about recurring villains. In my game, he was found and defeated pretty much as soon as he was met. But maybe in your game he is recurring. Number 7, Hustafa. Assuming that's how it's pronounced. The source for this one is something called Ship of Fools, which, and I quote, a 2-round RPGA tournament module by Ramon Delgado. I basically got the information from Mistipedia and went from there. It's essentially a pirate captain turned Jolly Roger, sailing the waters of the mists and the Sea of Sorrows, raiding, capturing ships, and rating the crew as sea zombies. We'll get to stat block idea for sea zombies in a second. Preparing for the fateful day that he can challenge the zombie lord, master of an island, which I don't think is in, I don't know where it is. We'll just hit the Sea of Sorrows. Only then will he be able to end his curse. However, he must muster up a significant and a force, an armada of no less than 13 ships. That's very specific. But his continued greed for riches conflicts with his mission of revenge. So I think if you're running the Sea of Sorrows or a coastal domain, I was going to say where towards the end of this section, but I'll say it now as I'm saying it. Sea of Sorrows, anything with a coast like Lamordra or Mordant, maybe they bump into Hustafa and Hustafa's ship and crew. Stat block, I took a while to think about this one, because he's described as being spectral, but though still corporeal spirit. So incorporeal to things like ghosts and poltergeists and spectres, but it's with a skeletal smiling visage. So something that's kind of like a skeleton but ghostly. At first I was thinking of things like Ghost Knight from Tome of Beasts, or Grim Jester with Tome of Beasts, or Skull Lord from Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, but reflavoured. So, for example, the Skull Lord 1 skull, not 3. Make it piratey, stick a pirate hat on them basically. Same with the other 2 I mentioned. And then I had another idea. What if it's, because it's a Jolly Roger like a skull, like skull and crossbones, right? What if it's just a flame skull in a pirate hat? Or a Demi-Lich in a pirate hat. And a Demi-Lich would work well because it's got jewels in the eyes. Then that would be pretty cool. And you can even have it like, if a flavour, it's got a skeletal body, but its head just like disattaches and floats or something was the idea I had. I thought that could work really well. For its sea zombie minions, you could consider the Drowned from Ghosts of Saltmarsh. That's what I used for Pietra's crew. I talk about this in my How I Ran the Sea of Sorrows video. And they are great. They are tougher variant zombies, and there's like 3 or 4 variants as well. When my players fought Pietra and a crew, they struggled initially, and then there was like a second battle later on where they had sort of more support and help and were able to attack them more easily. And if you need ghost ship maps, by the way, I heavily recommend Limithron on Patreon. I'll include a link in the description. And last but not least, number 8, Jacqueline Montarri. The main source for her is the Ravenloft novel To Sleep with Evil. I wouldn't say any of the Ravenloft novels are bad per se. It was one, let's just say it was one of my less favourite ones. It's a bit of an unusual one, and I preferred others to it, but Jacqueline was a standout character in that. She's kind of like a character who comes along, evil character who knows the Darklord who's the Darklord in the novel. And she is essentially a headless woman who likes to collect heads, similar to Dullahan, but wear the heads so that she's like a complete woman with a head again. For that reason, the headlessness, I instantly thought of the Dullahan for the stat block, the Dullahan from Van Richten's guide, but I changed the battle axe into a longsword. In fact, her information says she's got a Vorpal longsword called Iron Fang, and that's what made me think of the Dullahan as well, because the Vorpal sword is very similar to the Dullahan in that you get a natural 20 and you instantly behead someone, although in the Dullahan I think you've got a con save to save you from that. And I maybe change it to humanoid instead of undead, because it does say in the information that she was restored to life when cursed, so she's not undead anymore, she's humanoid. Humanoid without a head, however that works. And a cool bit of info I found out while researching this video is that her heads age 1 year for each day she wears them. So if she wears a head for a week, then she looks like she's aged 7 years in 7 days. So she's got a constant need for replacement heads, probably targeting young women. And then she can wear those for a few days or a week or two and then move on to the next head. I don't think this is in the info, this is just kind of a bit of flavour I would add. Perhaps there's a bonus if she has a head, or a disadvantage if she doesn't have a head. For instance, if she's headless, she's at disadvantage on attacks, and that would affect her Vorpal Sword ability. If recurring, perhaps she looks different every time the players see her, and that could be a really good way for her to disguise herself as well, because if they don't recognise the body, so if she's wearing different clothes, and they see a different woman's head, they might assume it's a different woman, and then they find out later on, oh, we've met this woman before, but she looked different because she had a different head. That could work really well. The art is by Talon Dunning. I think Talon Dunning did Rodjan Dilisnya I showed earlier, possibly some others. Talon gave me his blessing to show and use his art, so thank you, Talon. And where would you put Jacqueline? Wherever. It's great to have a Dullahan outside of the Rider's Bridge, because the Rider's Bridge is kind of its own sort of mini-domain, with the Dullahan as Darklord, the Headless Horseman. It's just kind of cool. You might be able to use one that's got a bit more character to it, I guess, than just this sort of like personality-less monster. Whereas Jacqueline's got, like, especially if you read the novel, she's such a great character. She's sassy, she's smart, she's devious, she's dangerous. Oh, and as a side note, I mentioned the second Taroka reading earlier. I'm pretty sure I had her down as a Fated Ally option. She'd be a stronger one, and she'd be an evil one as well. I know in the Fated Allies in Curse of Strahd, one of the options is Aragorn, the Vistana assassin. Well, she's an evil one as well, in a similar sort of vibe. That is my list of 8. I do have an honourable mentions list, because I originally had a list of about a dozen, maybe more. And I'm not sure I'll do a part 3. If I do a part 3 of this video, I will maybe expand on some of these when I do that. We have, I'm looking at the screen over here, Bad Hand Duke, an infamous pirate who became a spirit following his demise, came to haunt the hook he used. So this is from a source called Forged of Darkness. It's like a 2nd edition magic items source. And therefore I think the focus is more on the magic item tied to Bad Hand Duke, which is called Black as Hook, than it is the character. I don't know if the character actually properly exists. It's more like lore about him, and the item is there. But yeah, I thought it was quite cool to add him to the Sea of Sorrows, as well as Hustafa or whoever it was I mentioned earlier, as maybe they find the hook and then they've got to fight Bad Hand Duke, who's haunting them when they've got the hook. Boris Jorkin, a werebear who is a member of the Karjat. I think I found out recently it's pronounced Kargat, and I keep saying Karjat, so apologies for that. But werebears, I don't think I've ever come across a werebear in D&D. I know that obviously they exist in the monster manual, but that could be a cool thing to add to the Kargat/Karjat army with, you know, the vampires and whatever else they have. Mother Fury, a loop guru in Cartacus. She is the head of this clan or group of werewolves, loop gurus, and they're all loop gurus as well. So loop gurus are pretty tough. I don't know how you do an encounter with multiple. I kind of see them as like a loop guru boss with werewolf minions. Maybe consider something like that. But yeah, for a high level party, fighting a few loop gurus, that could be an interesting one, I think. Relmus Orbthright, leader of a doppelganger clan in Dame Monlieu. So you got a bunch of shape changers, people who can disguise themselves into Monlieu. Could have a lot of fun with that. Victor Segnoy, if that's how that's pronounced. Forgive me, I'm terrible at pronouncing... Well, I'm terrible at pronouncing most things, but especially like Eastern European or Russian-looking names. Victor is a wolf were. So you've got like jackal wares in the Monster Manual, who are rather than werewolf who's a person turned into a wolf, the opposite is like a wolf that's turned into a person, is my understanding. And in human form, he takes facade of helpful bards, trying to assist heroes in tracking down the most responsible for evil acts committed. So yeah, I think it makes sense to put it. I think in the lore he lives somewhere else, but Cartacus as a helpful bard kind of fits. And last but not least, so I did all those honourable mentions alphabetically by first name, but I'm going to end off with an A, Azrael Dak. Now I talked about Azrael in my alternative Fated Allies and Curse of Strahd video, because Azrael was a character that appeared alongside Lord Soth in the 2 Lord Soth novels, and so he's in Barovia at one point. So that's why I kind of suggest him as if you want like another evil Fated Ally, that could be cool. He is a dwarven werebadger, and he's an evil little dude as well. I think he like murdered his family and stuff like that, and obviously he buddies up to Lord Soth. You know, he's not going to be a good dude if you're friends with Lord Soth. Information for all of them, I think, pretty much can be found on Mistipedia, so thanks again to the Fraternity of Shadows and Mistipedia for existing. I love you. And that's it for this one. In addition to this part 2 of evil NPCs in Ravenloft, I am probably going to do a part 2 of my good NPCs, good in terms of good alignment NPCs. So I did a video probably less than a year ago, 6 to 9 months ago. It was good NPCs in Ravenloft, the good guys. And I've got an idea for doing a part 2 of that, so keep an eye out for that. Haslan is in the pipeline. I am still running it, but as I record this, they've met Haslik now. Haslik's given them a quest that will potentially trigger the endgame in Haslan. They'll sort of not endgame, final chapter, and then they'll go to the tower. And when they do the tower, that'll take a few sessions. So I'll probably do a video that's similar to my Forlorn videos. I'll probably do a video that's everything up to the tower, and then part 2 is the tower. So get a video out of Haslan soonish, I hope. Otherwise, please subscribe. Please check out my old videos. I've got a Ravenloft playlist and a Curse of Strahd playlist if you're interested in Curse of Strahd as well. And I'll see you on the next one. Thank you, Mr. Wanderous.